Diana Kahn joins me, and you could learn what her team is up to. Head over to dklawmd.com, dklawmd.com. And we're going to be talking about real estate law today.
As a lawyer, I say yes, but I promise if you hang out long enough, we have some good info.
Well, that's awesome. It's inevitability, right? We always have to deal with taxes and law.
If you ever find out I've gone to jail, it's probably because of unintentional IRS fraud. So definitely take my advice on everything IRS involved.
Yeah, that's not an admittance.
Absolutely not.
I'm just playing around.
I,
So,
I did a marketing event and I was speaking, and it was my first event in this venue. And some man came up to me and he had an IRS badge on. I text my staff and I was like, someone's here to arrest me. Ends up he was just a crazy guy with a fake badge, but that's another story.
well, I also want to point something out. On June 10th, you're going to have an event, Wealth and Wisdom, and you got
Yeah.
500 people booked to this thing already. That's insane.
We do, yeah. So we do like a real estate mastermind, and we try to get people from all over the country that focus on real estate, really, but also just kind of business. So we're talking everything from how to do novations, what's the trajectory like to do wholesale or subject twos, how do land trust play into it, how does AI help, tenfold your business. We have lots of little speaking nuggets, plus some of big headliners coming our way. And that's all on my website if anybody wanted to get a ticket. We do sell out, but so far we just announced today, so we still have some tickets available.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm always curious, events like that, and you're the one organizing this. Is anybody on that stage say something that makes you cringe?
All the time. I did one last year that our Wealth and Wisdom, our first one, we were talking to people more to go how to go from 0 transactions to 1 and, stop working the 9 to 5 and do it for yourself. And I had somebody on it who I'm sure she might listen to this and get a little offended, but she had way bypassed those people in the audience. So she was talking, I think her struggle was talking about hiring and firing people and how to do that. And I was sitting there like, nobody here has employees. Like, we're talking about how to get started. And she just kept going back to it and back to it. And, I pivoted quite a few times.
Yeah, I'm sure that's it's got to be hard, especially it's hard not to take ownership of something like that, of an event. It's kind of becomes your baby.
But then when I saw, the video reflections and the fact that we gave so many nuggets, it's really helpful. I usually don't like networking events that involve alcohol and just talking around. I think I close a lot of deals there, but I don't think I get a lot of wealth and wisdom. So that's why Wealth and Wisdom was born, is just to really get people who want to share the knowledge. And I think that goes with this, podcast. It goes with a lot of the ideas of those of us who are doing it well are willing to share the knowledge. It's just trying to find it and making it available for everybody.
I would be curious as to your journey into real estate law and where you landed, because it seems more and more that I talk to people, any kind of niche when it comes to real estate investing, more times than not is accidental.
It was definitely accidental here too. I had gotten into law school. I am typical, born in a communist country, moved here. My parents gave up everything. So didn't grow up with a lot of money, worked at a restaurant. My parents were like, you need to go to law school. I was like, all right, bet, let's do law school. And right before I went to law school, somebody gave me the idea that I should apply for a law firm to have some experience. Got hired. It was a law firm that had a retired lawyer that was probably in his 80s, had no idea what he was doing. Firm was being run by two real estate agents, and they were doing short sale negotiations right around that 2007 to 2010 crunch. Short sales were a thing, and nobody knew how to do it. Got hired, was supposed to be there for 3 months until I started law school. A year in, I took them from 80 short sales to 8,000 negotiated. We were the number one short sale negotiation company on the East Coast. I was running that whole operation. And then I put off law school for a few years and just kind of figured out real estate, sort of running an department for realtors. And then got to know a lot of realtors, got into the traditional business, eventually went to law school, told myself I would never, ever, ever in my life, go back to real estate. And then very quickly, I got out of law school, opened a real estate brokerage, opened a title company. I opened everything but the law firm. And then I realized I was the best real estate lawyer in Maryland that did not charge a penny. So that's when I niched my way into the law firm aspect as well.
Hmm. That's interesting that so early on you got into real estate, helped a company explode in that regard. What are some of the strategies or tactics, or it must have been some severe perseverance to
I think
attack something to that level?
I think it's just the ability that a lot of us think inside a box. And when you were doing short sales, they weren't regulated. They are now, but they were really not regulated back then. So it was just creative ways to find money and help people. And I think a lot of real estate and a lot of investors, novations, a lot of that is, finding ways to make money in a way that not necessarily circumvents the law, but finds the loopholes that allow you to help people, but also not break laws and make money for yourself. And it was just that creativity that allowed me to open up that network. And then once I started meeting realtors, it was just finding the creative ways to do transactions. I think a lot of people stick in a square and they're like, transactions have to be this way. The moment you realize there's no square and you can sort of make up your own ways of doing things, as long as you're ethically doing it, as long as you're within certain parameters, it opens up essentially the game, right? Which is how I got into it. And now I have 8 businesses across the board that all deal with real estate.
You mentioned that you opened a number of businesses before you went down the lawyer route. Like, give me the series of events there. Were you in school? Did you
Yeah.
have these businesses running and now you're trying to get your law degree?
So
How does that all work? How did you manage all this?
I was in law school at a time where law school said that you couldn't have a full-time job. Decided to get my real estate broker's license because I knew a lot of realtors and it's easy to market while you're in law school. So I did the real estate brokerage first. I actually opened up two and then realized that there's a huge niche for title companies, right? Because it's an affiliated business and it works to kind of keep money in your pocket. So my goal really in the beginning was to take my connections and grow businesses that allowed me to kind of passively feed my family while I was in law school. And that just kind of grew and got to a point where I didn't want to have a law firm for real estate, mostly because lawyers charge you in 10-minute increments to talk to people. And I don't subscribe to that model. I think it sucks. It's unfortunate. So it was really difficult for me to pivot to a law firm because I was like, if I have a law firm, I still want to be able to help everybody. And creating these vertically integrated businesses allowed me to create a law firm when I was ready, where now I'm taking on cases to help people or to help people streamline their business rather than just charge billable hours and not get anything done. And that really allowed me to empower my goals.
Well, that is a different mindset. Every time I've talked to a lawyer in my market, it's always rounded up to the next 10 minutes.
Exactly. So when I got my real estate license, I remember I was sitting, and this was a while ago, obviously 2006 ish. I took a class of marketing, and they told us if you want to be successful as a real estate agent, you have to market like a lawyer, put yourself on billboards, put yourself on buses. So when I started my own law firm, I was like, if I want to be a successful law firm, I should market like a realtor. So I changed that mindset and the trajectory to the way I market because I feel like putting yourself in a billboard is just an expensive way for people to recognize your name. But creating a family-based business that allows you to sort of call a lawyer as though they're your friend, but then you have all these other vertically integrated businesses, people remember that and they want to kind of feed into your family or feed into your vision, even if it's not in that moment for that particular case. So that's where we pivoted and started doing property management, construction. I started doing business mentorship, and then I started purchasing my own rentals, buy and holds. I started doing Burr method for my own. I have about 100 rentals now that I'm holding, and then I flip multiple a year. So it just kind of all fed into each other.
Yeah, I can't imagine, like, you're going after your license, being an attorney. You're starting multiple businesses. It sounds like you're still doing that to this day. I mean, back then as a student, I don't know how you kept the balls in the air, but how are you doing that now with as much activity you got going on?
I also have 3 young kids. I got a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. So I
Oh,
can't tell you that I'm keeping the same balls up in the air every day. I think it's figuring out that people actually like it when you're human and admit that you can't get to something as long as you set expectations and figure out which balls are glass and which ones are plastic and don't even pick up the plastic balls on days you can't.
is that something that came naturally to you, or is that something that you had to learn the hard way?
I think I want to learn, my mom got really sick a few years ago, and I just really took a deep dive at what my parameters of focus was. And I just really learned that a lot of what I wanted to do in my life was hinged on my mom's expectations or the way I was raised or the way things were. So just kind of breaking away from expectations and finding the boundaries that you need to live a successful life for yourself was a really big portion of it. It actually came from my now 7-year old that gave me that hindsight because, I say things to them that I think parents say, like, tomorrow's another day, we could try again, or, little things that we say to kids. And I remember I had a breakdown when my mom got sick and I was just crying. And my kid was like, "Are you okay, mommy?" And I was like, buddy, not really. I'm just having a really bad day and I've been yelling at you. And there goes my 4-year-old just saying, "Well, the day's not over yet, mom, and you're human and mistakes are okay." And then I was just like, whoa, I say this to my kid all the time, but I've never really integrated it into my own life. And I really changed that mentality after. And it's really kind of expanded my success.
Mhm. Yeah, it's crazy what we learn from, our kids echo us in so many ways. And sometimes we don't listen to our own advice until it's echoed back to us.
Yep, exactly. I think that's the thing. You hear about CRM systems or coaches or the way to do real estate or the mastermind, right? The truth is, they all work. Every single thing works. I'm sure there's people that do this podcast with you that completely disagree with what I say, and their method works and my method works. But the truth is, you just got to do it hard and listen to the advice and just don't give up and keep going at it. Everything works if you try hard enough. And that's a thing that sometimes we don't realize until somebody else echoes it back to us.
I saw a diagram recently regarding motivation, and it was this big initial hump, and then it's just eventually kind of peters out. But what you're suggesting is the follow-up piece to that is the discipline, being
Mhm.
consistent and persistent with your behavior. It's amazing how that's actually what's going to lead to any kind of success.
Deal with a lot of real estate investors that are kind of what I call inspirations to me. They have more than 100. They're doing all this stuff. They're making six-figure incomes, doing lots of real estate stuff. And I always ask them about their backgrounds. And one thing that I found in common is that they all say that the first 4 years, they were just kind of stagnantly going. And then next thing you know, in the fifth year, they kind of went like this. And I think the realization is we're not just going like this and all of a sudden you did something that worked and it went like this. It's just you just kept going hard enough until eventually you took everything you learned, you took everything that did or did not work, and next thing you know, you just opened up that, success shovel where now
Right.
it's easier to do. And I think, you know, from the other side, people look at it and they're like, wow, she's got 100 rentals and she's got all these businesses and that could never be me. But at the same time, a few years ago, wasn't me either. I just kept going.
How do you stay focused on your core businesses and not have the squirrel effect? You're chasing the next thing.
I think a lot of it is learning to trust people around you, realizing that you can't make money if you're not surrounding yourself with people and willing to share the wealth. As a solo practitioner, as a solo business owner, it's really hard, right? Traditional real estate agents, I always tell them you are a 9 to 5er, regardless whether or not you're 1099 or not. If you're selling and buying real estate for other people, you're really just working a job and you're not building your own wealth. You're not building your own time. You're not doing any of that. And it's the ability of kind of realizing that you have to run whatever industry you want to get into. You have to run it as a business and you have to scale it and have goals and values. And to do that, you can't do it alone. And I think a lot of us, when we struggle with money, I grew up really poor. And the idea of having another party working for me and being responsible to pay them a salary sounded so scary to me the first time. It wasn't until about 2.5 years ago, maybe, I broke down in a corner somewhere because my kids had costume day 5 days in a row, 3 kids, summer camp, different costume every day. That's for those of you counting, that's 15 costumes. And I was trying to run like multiple businesses. I did not have employees. And it was a Thursday. And I was like, just the idea of 15 costumes, I started crying in the corner and I was like, I can't do this. Like, I need help. And I kid you not, I put out some feelers and I said to somebody, like I did the math and I was like, if I hire somebody at minimum wage, $16 an hour, what is it going to cost me for 3 months of their time? And I did that math and I committed to, I can afford that. And I'm going to fire them in exactly 3 months. And I hired them on instinct, hired them that evening, and told myself in 60 days, if they're not adding value where they're making back their salary, I'm going to get rid of them. And it was like an impulse fire. It was an impulse everything. The next day she came in, I had no idea what to do. And I gave her my kid's passport application. So it was like, this has been sitting on my desk forever, and this is where you can start. And I had no idea what to do. Right. And then I had her order costumes. And then next thing you know, 60 days in, I had tripled my income because I was able to give her all the crap I didn't want to do. And that was 2.5 years ago. I'm at a staff of 39 now.
Did you find that delegation hard pill to swallow?
I did in the beginning. I think it's hard to swallow because, you Google which, you, for me, it's like I have a law firm. I'm hiring somebody part time. What should I have them do? Google will say, have them pick up phones. And I started kind of maneuvering towards that goal of like, okay, have an employee, they should do this, and this employee should be doing cold calling. And I started kind of following the trends of what people recommended, and it wasn't working for me. And I realized it was because I'm good on the phones. Like, I don't want her picking up my phones because my personality is what sells my business. So for me in the beginning, I had to really learn that what Google says is the right way to run a business is not the right way for you, no matter what you do. But I think the big difference is getting comfortable with what your ideas are and what your ideals are and where your values are. Because maybe Jack, you're not good on the phones and that wouldn't work for you. For me, like picking up my phone call when somebody calls my law firm, I can pretty much get them to send me money and retain me within a first phone call within a few minutes. And that's just my personality.
There has to be some pretty significant trust built with you being the one to answer your call, though.
Yeah. Yeah. It just means, I spend quite a lot of time on the phone, which means that I don't have time to do other stuff. And it's also just acknowledging that people can't always do everything and hearing feedback. And that's all just, it's a very non conventional way of running a business. My doors are open, my staff comes in, I hire based on personality more than I do skill set. I think skill set can be taught for anybody, pretty much anybody who has the right values and ideas and personality, what I want to succeed in. And I think that they can take that value more so than a skill set. And that's a very difficult thing to do as a business owner to say, like, I'm going to hire somebody with zero experience and train them because they could leave. And you've spent quite a lot of time training somebody. And the truth is, for me, that first method worked more. It requires a lot more dedication, but it gives me good output.
Hmm. Well, just to remind everybody, we are talking to Diana Khan. You can learn what her team is up to and how they can help by heading over to dklawmd.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. If you found some value in what we're talking about so far, do us a quick favor, share this with one of your investor friends. So, Diana, we're going to change the subject a little bit because I would imagine you've talked to enough investors now to start to see trends here and there. What are you seeing right
Yeah.
now, especially in the legal world, trend wise, that we should be paying attention to?
I think the first thing, at least I'm on the East Coast, and for us here, novations are starting to be more relevant. Subject twos in and of themselves are starting to kind of go out a little bit, but land trusts are working. So it's just, you know, in realism, land trust versus subject to, it's the same exact thing, but it's adapting to that mindset and shift change. I think there's a huge legislative difference now. People are making money off real estate. It's on YouTube, you're kind of watching it, and legislators aren't necessarily trying to stop us from making money. That's not what it is. But they're putting a fine line of making sure that there's no, elder abuse, that there's no, taking advantage. And I think a lot of investors have never been regulated. And they're starting to regulate pretty hardcore. As an investor yourself, be familiar with what your requirements are. Make sure your business structure is set up. Make sure I can't Google you and find everything out about you because then I can sue you. Just make sure you cover yourself both legally and ethically in a way that as these systems change and as the process changes in the legislative factor, you're still making good money, but you're doing it within the parameters that are legally sound.
A lot of the people that listen to shows like this are getting into real estate investing for the first time, and I don't want us to scare them, but what are some of those things that ducks they need to get in a row
So
to
the
consider?
first one is, if you're doing fix and flips, which is the idea of just you're purchasing a property, you're fixing it, you're flipping it, you're selling it, you're moving on. That's a great way to make good money. Do not keep your LLC open after you're done. I know there's a lot of attorneys who say one rental to one LLC or this to that. And there's a lot of ideas out there, and I can go into what works and what doesn't. But I think we will all agree that if you're doing a fix and flip, you should start an LLC or a company for that fix and flip and close it when you're done. And the reason being is because what I see investors do a lot is they'll create one company. Let's call it REI LLC. They do like 10 fix and flips. They hold all the rental properties in it. And essentially what they're doing is they're building up this business that's holding all of their money. The statute of limitation on being sued for a fix and flip is 3 years, at least in the state of Maryland. It's anywhere between 2 to 3, depending on where you are, from the time that the person discovers an issue, not from the time you did the fix and flip. So the issue now is if you did a fix and flip 5 years ago when you were learning, they discover some structural issue now, the clock starts now. So you've built up 5 years of this LLC. It's holding all of your rentals, it's holding all of your money. And now all of a sudden you can get hit with a lawsuit. And that scares the crap out of me. Fix and flips, I just open an LLC, I close it down. That way I know that I'm not building this little essentially fortress of my income and then having it kind of susceptible to lawsuits. And that kind of goes in line with if you are doing multiple LLCs, whichever practice you want to do, make sure that where you're holding your money, if you don't have a holding company or you do, what's holding your money, where your income is sort of being generated, it's not a client facing business. So it's not a business that interacts with sellers. It's not a business that interacts with buyers or mortgage companies. So make sure you pay basically all of your companies into a holding company that's not client interacting, because then it's not susceptible to lawsuits.
Now, this is kind of a new concept. In fact, out of all of the episodes I've had, I don't think I've had anybody suggest setting up an LLC and closing it out for each flip. So could you kind of go into this just a little bit more? Like, what's it entail? Setting up an LLC can be relatively straightforward. What's the steps or process to close out the LLC, and what type of protection does that actually give you when you close it out?
So let's kind of talk about a situation before we get into the process, right? So let's say that I have tenant by the name of Tom come into my law firm, and Tom says, "Hey, listen, I was renting a property from Jack and the ceiling caved in, and I'd like to sue Jack." Forget what Tom, the tenant, thinks, right? Forget if they have a good case, forget if they don't have a good case, any of that. As a lawyer, I'm going to make 40% contingency on a lawsuit against you. If I can find your information out and that property is being held by your personal name or by an LLC name, I can then find out within a couple of seconds where you live, who you're married to, what bank accounts you have. There's actually a website that lawyers put in your just general information, and it tells me, like, it's literally color coordinated. Green is a good lawsuit. Yellow means they might pay, they might not. Red means they don't have money. So if you don't have yourself set up right, within a couple of minutes of talking to Tom, the tenant, I now know if you're worth a lawsuit. And I'm keeping 40% of whatever I sue you on. So if you've done a bunch of fix and flips in those properties, somebody wants to sue you, and now let's say your nest egg, what you've built out, your rentals, your rental income, maybe, maybe you just did a novation, maybe you have money in that bank account. If I can find all that for you pretty quickly, now I know that if I send you a demand letter, you're going to panic because that bank account has all your money. There's what's called a preservation of evidence paragraph we put in that says, hey, preserve everything. Don't make any changes to your bank accounts. Don't do any of that stuff. Well, you're going to panic. You're going to absolutely panic because all your money is in this one company. So all of a sudden, a $10,000 lawsuit, you're going to be like, well, if I offer them five, they'll probably go away. It's pretty easy. Now, in the other essence, which what I do is I build investors to make sure that they're almost like anonymous online, is if you have, your rental properties in an LLC, And that LLC is separate from, where you're keeping your personal stuff. And your personal stuff is owned by a trust. So on paper, if you look me up on paper right now, I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't, the businesses I have that I've talked about, I own all of them. But if you look me up, the resident agent is anonymous. You can't find where I am. And then a company owns those companies. So now all of a sudden, what I've done is I haven't prevented Tom the tenant from suing me, but now the lawyer's looking at this like it's a $10,000 lawsuit. I'm making 40%. I now have to prove that Diana created an LLC and shut it down to avoid a lawsuit. She then paid another company. I have to figure out where this company is registered. I then have to figure out how that money went in and sideways. I have to do subpoenas. In order to lock down Diana's income, I now have to take 15 steps. Well, in those 15 steps, a lawyer's going to be like, $4,000 doesn't seem as worth it anymore, right? So that's kind of the big idea with the fix and flips is like, don't make it easy for people to find you. Don't make it easy for people to kind of touch your nest egg. Find a way to keep yourself anonymous so that when you do have a lawyer looking you up for whatever reason, they're not touching you at a $10,000 lawsuit. They're only going to really touch you if it's a massive lawsuit that's worth that contingency, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
because it's all dollars of cents. That's all it is. The easier you are to find, the less you're set up, the easier it is to pierce a corporate veil. Those are all factors that I look at when I decide to take on a case.
So it's almost like an insurance policy. It's like you're setting people up. Is the juice worth the squeeze when
Right.
it comes to
Exactly. It's not preventing a lawsuit, but like I have clients who have set up these structures with me. They get a demand letter and they literally throw it in the trash. They're like, if they want to file a lawsuit, that's fine. They want to spend the money to get there. Like, we'll talk then. But until then, now I'm not sweating. I'm not losing sleep at night because I know I'm sort of protected. So if you think about it from like my perspective, if you want to talk about just the way I've got myself structured, is I have 8 outward facing businesses. And those businesses are companies that communicate with clients, they communicate with people, they communicate with the state, like I'm licensed entity in those, etc. Well, all of those 8 businesses, let's just say, just rudimentary numbers to make this easy. Let's say one of the businesses is making $10 in net profit. Well, the way I have it set up is that $10 comes in. I pay a holding company almost like a service fee. I own the holding company of $8. So that original first company is now always going to have only $2 in it. It doesn't have all of my profits. It's paying into the holding company that does not have any client interactions. The holding company is being fed, all of those LLCs are being fed into the holding company. So the holding company is what's actually holding the money. All of my client facing businesses have money, but they are not flush, for lack of a better word. The holding company then, it's essentially has my house in it, it has my car in it, it has all of my business expenses there. Again, most people don't realize it's me because it's a holding company that's not registered in the state that I live in. So it's harder to find because I have it in Wyoming where privacy laws are higher. And I pay most of my life expenses as business expenses out of the holding company. Whatever money the holding company has left at the end of the month, I then pay myself a W 2 paycheck. So the holding company is now not flush either. And instead of paying on a business level, I'm paying taxes on a W 2 level. When I get that paycheck, I now have a personal trust, which separates what I own from my personal name into a trust that belongs to my family that I don't own and thus can't be penetrated. Half my money from the W 2 goes into the trust. And then I have just a little bit of money in my personal account. So people are listening to this and they're like, holy moly. Well, if you're thinking holy moly, think about an attorney who wants to sue me. It's not going to be worth it for a $10,000 lawsuit. People who are going to figure out that I've got this system set up, which is perfectly legal and perfectly within the rights of how you set up your structure, they're going to really try to break that structure if it's worth the squeeze, for lack of a better word.
Sure. So, let's go back to the house flipping scenario again. You create this LLC. Do you hold that LLC stays open until you sell the property, close it out?
I buy a house from you, I'll have it under Diana Khan and or assigns, right? Because I don't necessarily have an LLC set up right now. Some of my investors keep like 5, 6 LLCs kind of open so that they're ready to go. In this business, sometimes you get an opportunity pretty quickly. they'll purchase under the LLC name, they'll fix it, they'll flip it, they'll sell it. And then as soon as that's done, in Maryland, it's about $1,000 to close the LLC out in a legal way. So now if somebody wants to sue 5 years from now and they look up that LLC, it's no longer active. The resident agent was not me. So you can't figure out like who owns the company. Again, to pierce the corporate veil, you have to prove fraud. So even if they can prove fraud, like, you have to figure out who owns the company first. And it's a dead end for a lawyer who may not know how to investigate that until like they take a little bit of a deeper end. No, I really think people should be ethical in what they do, but it does kind of aid in those protections.
Hmm. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts here. So let's say somebody's interested in this, Diana. What parts of the country do you serve, and is it nationwide? Like what?
I do, yeah.
Who can you? Sure.
So I do trusts and LLC setups nationwide. Obviously, I'm only barred and licensed as a lawyer in Maryland. So I can speak to Maryland law and I can speak to how to create it and I can get all those items and systems set up for you. But, if there's something like Medicaid or government benefits or Social Security income involved, I can work with a lawyer in your state. Because remember, there's ways to set up your system so a trust would actually allow you to qualify for SSI or Medicaid as you age, even if you have a bunch of rentals. And that's also really strategic. So, yes, I can do nationwide. If it is sort of involving this Medicaid planning SSI portion, I work with a lawyer in the state you're in.
Okay. This has been eye-opening, Diana. I do want to send everybody to your site again. It is dklawmd.com, dklawmd.com. Learn more how Diana and her team can help you regarding this. Before we start closing out this episode, Diana, is there anything we should have tried to hit on here today?
No, I think you've got it all. Our website does have like a bunch of e-booklets that cover kind of a lot of this and the business structure. We also do kind of like a structure that we would recommend based on your status. So check out the website if you have anything. Also, if anybody just wants to shoot me a text, I do give my cell phone number. Like I'm a crazy person, but my cell number is 443-739-6724. That is my cell phone number. It is not AI. You can shoot me a text. Feel free to do so.
Well, you're a brave woman.
I am crazy, brave.
Well, I appreciate your time here. If you're ready, we'll hit up the rapid fire questions and close out this episode.
All right.
What lie do real estate investors often tell themselves?
I'll get my shit together after this.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Buy now.
Do you have a book recommendation?
Anxious People. It is nonfiction. It gives you perspective on multiple people's opinions.
And finally, what single strategy or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time-saving impact to you or your business?
I use AI in everything, and I openly and honestly talk about the fact that it can change your life if you know how to use it.
Well, Diana, this has been fantastic. One last time, it is dklawmd.com. Really hope you'll consider coming back again sometime because there were quite a few topics I still had the docket that we could have broached here today.
Happy to.